China is clearly an ascending, rising economic, political, and cultural power in the world. In stark contrast, the United States is a descending power. They committed themselves 20 years ago to develop their infrastructure. They have been so successful, they build in advance of the demand. Extraordinary achievement. We don't have that. But the kinds of social organization that the Chinese have put into place are what other countries need to learn from. They are less the competitors and more the wannabes of this world.
Of the 10 busiest ports in the world, how many do you think are in China? Well, let me tell you. 7. How many do you think are in the United States? None. How many do you think are in Europe? None. It's remarkable what is happening here. The mass growth of high-speed rail lines around the country is quite amazing, and there's still a queue of people trying to get on them. There's no empty seats on the trains, such as the demand. There's twice as much high-speed rail track in China already than there is across the whole of Europe. That's quite amazing.
In 1988, China had no motorways at all. And now, 30 years later, it has 84,000 miles of them. That's more than any other country in the world. And they're only just getting into their stride. Since 2011, they've been building 6,000 miles of motorway every year. 6,000 miles a year! It beggars belief, and it's not like the terrain is easy. Here, though, there ain't no mountain high enough, and there ain't no valley low enough to stop them. This bridge, for example, is 34 miles long.
What do I remember most about China when I first arrived? And the answer is bicycles. When I first arrived in Shanghai and Beijing, there were tens or hundreds and hundreds of thousands of bicycles. It was a bicycle country. So I stayed in the Peace Hotel, which is very famous, in Shanghai on the Bund in 1993. And I was looking opposite to Pudong, and there was nothing. Nothing. It was just level. And I went back to there, 3 years later, and there were hundreds of huge skyscrapers. I'd never seen any building project like that in my entire life. A complete creation of a new city, essentially, in 2 or 3 years. That convinced me something extraordinary was happening here.
We didn't have so many high-rise buildings like now, a global center, like there was nothing like that around. This change in my country would take 200 years probably.
And now you see that changing. There are less like small, maybe family-owned shops. Now it's more like Wawa or 7-Eleven or something like that, right?
When I came here first, there was only Line 1 and Line 2, and now I think there's 10 metro lines.
I think it's a blessing that I've been here for 20 years. A lot of things change, particularly in the economy, infrastructure, and also in technology.
Developing an extraordinary infrastructure of expressways, of railways, and a larger high-speed rail network than the rest of the world put together. China have really majored on infrastructure in a big way, and I think this has been so important to the development of China because it's created a connectivity across China which has drawn the country together and allowed the market to develop in the kind of way it has. Chinese society, when it was growing at 10% a year, around 7% a year, this led to an enormous build-up of innovative capacity, of innovative thinking across Chinese society. This was not just, this has been going on for a long time.
Can't be right. And I was looking into this earlier and just wondering, for the sake of argument, how the Chinese do these things. And I noticed that they were able to build a whole new station in the space of 9 hours by flooding it with thousands of workers. We should be much more imaginative about getting infrastructure in quickly instead of condemning people to being isolated in remote areas.
China has done a remarkable job of putting infrastructure in place to handle what they see as growth for the next 20 years. They've added a number of airports, they've added highways, they've done all these logistics. We haven't done that. We're talking about, we have not added a new runway at O'Hare in 50 years, right? The airspace is crowded. We can solve the airspace problem through AI and all that. But you need more pilots, and you're going to need more airports, and you're going to need them in different places.
And it's a country that's been on the move, and at the same time, it's really trying to help other parts of the region. Of course, this is Shanghai, but China has other regions that are up and coming as well. Yeah. And you can see that infrastructure. I'm from the city of Chongqing, southwest China. It's the start of the Belt Road, the BRI in China.
Okay.
And this is a city that 20-some years ago was full of smog. I remember my wife sending me the picture of Chongqing saying, you know what, let's go to this city that the mainstream media says don't go.
Right.
And we saw this really blown out black smog photo of Chongqing, and then arrived there a few weeks later saying, wait a minute, this is not even close to what we see.
We were out in Chongqing a few months ago, and we were into some fairly rural areas, and I was gobsmacked at the extent and the quality of the highways they built to those villages. But what happens then is you get people who build businesses in those little villages, and they're able to distribute their products. We've recently been to this little village in the middle of nowhere, and they're selling their vegetables online on live streaming and distributing all over China simply because they have that infrastructure network to get that product distributed.
Yeah.
And that shows you why building the infrastructure is so important, because it enables the commerce.
Yeah. It's an intricate puzzle, and the infrastructure is an important part of it.
And at the end of the day as well, it just makes our lives so much better. Like for the end user who's trying to just get around and go to my hometown, or not me, but the Chinese, go to your hometown, or go and see some friends. It makes it so much more accessible, and it's so much cheaper. And even the people who aren't on a great whack of money can get around to their hometowns, once or twice a year.
Well, obviously, infrastructure is a big one. The way that Beijing has changed as a city, the subways. I mean, if you look at America, it takes us 20 years to build one subway line, and China has built 15, 18, 19 in the same period of time. The high-speed rail system is absolutely incredible. It's something that has benefited millions of people and linked the country in a new and innovative way. The technology that has been developed is just perfect, runs like clockwork. So I think that these infrastructural achievements are something that are the most impressive to me in China. The way the technologies that they use in our everyday lives, telephones, cell phones, the cashless society that China has developed now.
Compare the process of building a high-speed railway in China with a similar project in any typical Western country. In the West, before a single metre of track is laid, detailed feasibility studies are commissioned to work out whether or not the line is likely to be profitable. If not, there's very little chance it will get built. In China, the railways are funded by the government. Much of the network, especially in less populous regions of the country, consistently fails to make money. For instance, the Zhengzhou-Xi'an high-speed railway ran just 30 trains in 2016. Other factors, such as harsh climate conditions on the line from Guiyang-Guangzhou, cause eye-wateringly high maintenance costs that all but obliterate profits. No problem when the cashed-up central government in Beijing is footing the bill.
China sees a problem, and they fix it. They build a dam. We debate what to rename it. That's why their airports look like this, and ours look like this. In San Francisco, it took 10 years just to get 2 bus lines through environmental review. The Big Dig, a tunnel in Boston, took 16 years. China once put up a 57-story skyscraper in 19 days. They demolished and rebuilt the Sanyuan Bridge in Beijing in 43 hours. We binge watch, they binge build. When COVID hit Wuhan, the city built a quarantine center with 4,000 rooms in 10 days, and they barely had to use it because they quickly arrested the spread of the disease. They were back to throwing raves in swimming pools while we were stuck at home surfing the dark web for black market Charmin. We're not losing to China. We lost.
One of the immediate things to do is to essentially call a shutdown of the country. That when China had this big explosion a year ago, they completely shut down. Then the intermediate, I think you need, what the Chinese did when they had a crisis, you might recall, literally within a few days, they built these emergency units that served as hospital. It was an accomplishment that everybody marveled at, saying,
whatever we think of the Chinese, they are building infrastructure in Jamaica that Britain chose not to build in 300 years. This is just a simple fact of it. They've just cut the travel time to Montego Bay in half, which obviously what that does for the Jamaican economy and Jamaican business. However, what was interesting talking to most of the Jamaicans I spoke to, in fact all of them, even the ones that had a problem with the Chinese relationship there, when I said, what is it the Chinese are doing that American capital or British capital or French capital is not doing? What are the specific negative things that the Chinese are doing? And no one could name anything. There are several projects that the Chinese have proposed in Jamaica that the Jamaican people said no to, the Jamaican government had to say no to. What was the Chinese response? Was it to send the CIA in? And was it to overthrow the Jamaican democracy? Was it to cut off aid to Jamaica? No. They said, okay, we proposed a business deal, you said no. Here's another one. Because if we've told them no for 3 or 4 things already, and they haven't murdered us or bombed us or overthrown, then clearly we can keep telling them no if we don't like something.
So I agree with you about the infrastructure, like the Chinese infrastructure and how reliable they are. As you mentioned before, like in the last episode, how China supported Egypt in the CBD project and how it was very, very successful. There were a lot of projects that Egypt has to choose one of them, and they actually chose the Chinese one, the infrastructure one. They chose the Cairo monorail to be in Egypt, and it's actually, if it's completed, it will be the longest monorail ever in the world, and it's structured by Chinese manufacturer. And another thing is the development of the Suez Canal, as it is considered the heart of the Belt and Road Initiative. So China deeply supported Egypt to develop this Suez Canal.
Even with the global lead in infrastructure, China is paying more attention to innovation. China has announced plans to develop a maglev train capable of reaching a speed of 600 kilometers an hour, with the goal of reducing the time between Beijing and Shanghai from the current 5.5 hours to only 3.5 hours. In contrast, infrastructure spending in the United States has been plagued by significant delays and cost overruns. Now, I was born in New Hampshire, near the debacle called the Big Dig in Boston. Planning started in 1982. Construction finally started in 1991, but it didn't officially conclude until 2007. It took 25 years for the project to start to end, and there was a cost overrun of 190%.